doing the talking. So I have just a couple of slides to really speak to a couple of things, but we would to be an open session. I'm hearing noise. Okay, which is normal these days. Ah, doggy out there. That's awesome. Okay. You know, us, Stephen and Khaled, I will not go through the introduction. You guys read our titles and what we do. We're pretty old timers, and we've done lots of computer system validation and anything under the sun. The one thing that I would like everyone to keep in mind, and I'd like to keep really this slide in front of everyone. Anytime we're talking moving forward, and I hope right after this conference, everyone is talking about CSA, is to keep in mind these 5 things, right? Because if you put them, you know, if you keep them in mind, it really makes it easy for the next step, whatever that next step is, right? We've been talking CSV for the past 25 years. I think it's time to change, time to evolve, time to look forward, time to automate, and you know, finally, you know, the regulatory agencies, they're actually reaching out and helping out. Yes, you can do a few things, and you don't have to kill yourself to validate a system, for instance. Of course, our topic today is going to be on change control. Stephen is going to walk you through, you know, few things that he has implemented. Again, this is our interpretation based on our opinion, based on our experience. Yes, our change control have been inspected. We've implemented change control. And again, to me, we don't want to work toward what the inspector is telling us or what they want to see. It's focusing on quality, right? You heard me. I did not say focusing on compliance. We're focusing on quality. With that said, I'm going to move on to, you know, maintaining.
Go back, Khaled. Go back.
You got it.
Because I think, you know, we've talked about this before, and CSA, it's not just your initial implementation. It's not just your project phase. And what we're going to be talking about today is the change control. The same things that apply to your initial deployment of a system apply with CSA. So don't think of this as you go live and then you're back in a CSV model. Okay? That's all I wanted to emphasize there.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. Go ahead, drive it. It's all yours.
All right. So in a change control process, first of all, you know, I've seen organizations that get a little crazy on the number of approvers or participants in that change control. And as they say, what's the saying? Too many cooks in the kitchen oversalts the recipe, right? So yeah, there's really 3 key people. You need the business process owner, the system owner, and the quality approver. And each one of those has their own rules. So when you're assessing risk, your business process owner understands how that requirement that's changing could impact patient safety and product quality. Hope they do, right? You should. Your system owner is going to understand how that function's built, whether or not they had a hand in it or whether or not it's just something that's out of the box. And your quality approver is obviously just looking at the, are you meeting your internal procedures? Are you meeting expectations? Are you meeting the regs?
Any questions on this slide? Comment? Do you do the same? Do you do something different? Please jump in.
And guys, you can have as many SMEs as you want participating in this process, but when you get down to the approval, streamline your approvals. Think about where approvals really add value.
And actually, this is Kurt. Steve, exactly what you just said, add value. That's basically what I've challenged. Is it bothers me when the signatures become, or the approvals become a rubber stamp.
Yep.
And in our workflow, QA is the last approver, and reviewer. You know, everybody can review anytime. But anyway, the long story short is the less is more.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Kurt, thank you for saying that word, challenge. Challenge the status quo. Not
Absolutely.
just because somebody has done it for 20 years, or yeah, we've done this. We've always done it this way. Well, guess what? There is a new way. There's always a new way. And actually, that's what my wife said too. There's always a new way.
And in reality, you could, I don't want to curse on this, but you could use one of the curse words and say to you, to me, and I'll accept that more than I would accept, well, this is the way I've always done it, you know?
Yep.
And that's kind of like the worst curse you could possibly say.
You bet.
And, you know, and our culture at AstraZeneca is to challenge status quo, and speak up and ask, right? And so what we do, and that's become the culture at the company, you know? So if there's no value, or if this is the way we always did it, why, you know, change? Yeah, and you know, if there's a good reason to.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's your role in? Sorry, what's your role in AstraZeneca?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm a senior quality engineer in QA, responsible for our facility.
Okay, great.
Everything.
Just as another example on that, Kurt, you know, and I have Tina on the phone here. When we were at Baxter, we really challenged the business approver on design documents. You know, we heard for years from the business approvers, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, right? So why were we forcing them to approve a document they don't understand? It's a technical document. So really think through who's approving your documents and whether or not it adds value, just like you said.
Exactly. And if you know, and that's, I've gotten in trouble in a couple of meetings, but like some of the senior, you know, people above me that have signed something, I'll ask them very pointed questions, and then you know, about contents of the document. If they can't explain it, then why are they signing it?
Yep.
Thank you.
And this is Tina. One more thing that I've seen is, you know, you really do need to challenge who is approving, because if you have everybody approving, then they feel like, oh, the other person's looking at it. So really nobody's really looking at it.
Good point.
With the
That is a
content.
great point. That is a great point. Or they say, well, quality will look at it, right? And when I
You
was
got it.
when I was a quality approver on those technical documents, I didn't understand 90% of them. I'd look and say, well, the header's right, the footer, I guess it's good.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I wound up implementing in our templates more of, and try to get it in the SOPs, is that what's the role, and you know, what the responsibility and accountability, kind of like the RACI type of thing.
Yep.
But you know, defining what is it that your signature is signifying. You know, so if your signature is, hey, this signature means that I ran a spell checker and the formatting looks pretty when I hold it 50,000 feet away from me, or, you know, 5 feet away, and, you know, that type of thing, versus technically I've reviewed this and technically it's correct, or it's GMP or GDP and all that neat stuff. So defining what it is, so you're putting accountability to what the approver's signature indicates, right? And that has eliminated a lot of that, you know, well, ways it's going to do it, you know, and so on and so forth.
100%.
I have a question around platforms. So in the case of like a Viva, right, where you have a platform that has multiple business processes, multiple business owners, right? What is your approach for that type of scenario?
So the way I handled that was something like TrackWise, where I had an instance, say, with change control, CAPAs, complaints, all of that within the platform, is on a change control level, if it was only the complaints module that was impacted, I'd get the platform owner and then the module owner. So I'd always get the platform owner and the module owner, but I'd never bothered the module owners that weren't impacted by that change.
I see. Yeah, and I get that part. So in the case of Viva, right, you have RIM, you have quality docs, right?
Yep.
You have regulatory, you have quality. You may have clinical from an ETMF perspective, right?
Yep.
And all those changes happen at one time. We like to do one change control to minimize signatures, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are there.
You have two options there, and I've done it in both ways. One, if your platform owner is comfortable taking responsibility for all the individual workflows, and I have had platform owners that understood those different modules, that understood what was going on. I've had other platform owners that said, no, literally, I just own the technology. I don't own the business process. I want nothing to do with this. But if you can have that one business owner that takes accountability, takes credit for representing all of your other BPOs, just make sure you document that down, that that's what their signature is.
Yeah, from my perspective, and hey, Michael, glad to see you here registered. Really, from my perspective, if an impact assessment is done, right, and it shows really what's being impacted, now you have transparency. Here's what's happening. And I would send it out for acknowledgement and not necessarily approval. Just an acknowledgement. Hey, I know you all are going to be impacted. The system could be down, but here are the risks, right? So again, it's all about really transparency and what's going on. No one should hide anything, which we've seen it in many cases where, yeah, I'm not sure really what's happening if I do this. The system, the server might go down. Well, did you do enough testing in your development? Do you have enough to show that you're not going to fall on your head, right? So it's really all about transparency, provide impact assessment and acknowledgement. Yeah.
Yep. Tell the story.
Great, great feedback. Thank you. Both
You
of
bet. You bet. All right.
Khaled and Stephen, we had a chat message that came in. I don't know if you saw it. I can read it off from Richard. Do you see this type of change control approval on individual changes or releases?
Both. Both.
Yeah.
I did see that. I responded in the chat.
Okay.
Sorry, I have too many screens open here. So.
And yeah, folks, if you're not comfortable just speaking up, feel free to send a message in the chat pane, and Khaled and Stephen will be more than happy to answer your questions that way as well.
Chris, please feel free to interrupt in case we miss those.
Got it. All right, I'm on it.
I'd like to chime in on Michael's mention. Mike, you had mentioned about Viva or V system, which I was messed up on. Anyhow, because we're implementing that, and other systems like TrackWise and all that neat stuff. Where the workflow is, for signatures are electronic, and we're really heading away from paper. Everything, from batch record on up or down, whichever direction you want to look at, is the same. So anyway, long story short, the reason and all that stuff, it really doesn't make a difference what system or how the workflow works. The review and approval definition as to what that is, what the intent of a individual's review and what is the intent of their approval, and it doesn't have to be a person name, but a department or a role, I guess, in the workflow.
Yeah,
that's what's really important, not so much the system, all that stuff. And if it can't be defined, if it is not defined within the system, SOPs, some sort of control type of document is definitely effective, and that's how we've done it, and we've gone through tons of inspections without any observations.
And bravo to going paperless. It's 2020,
exactly,
almost 2021.
Exactly. Yeah, we're about 10 years behind.
Yes, indeed. Yep. Would love for you guys to join us tomorrow. We have the think tank on the Polarian demo for the CSA risk automated. I would love to see most of you on there because we really have to get off paper or hybrid. Hybrid is paper. I'm sorry. All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments from anyone? All right. I guess we're really here. Stephen is going to walk you through again the CSA risk assessment, and again we're going over it in multiple presentations for a specific reason. Okay. We just wanted to resonate and leverage it, copy it, take it, use it. do whatever you want with it.
Whether it's your overall risk assessment, your functional risk assessment, or your change risk assessment, the CSA methodology can be applied. You're going to look at your changes in aggregate and determine what their potential to impact patient safety and product quality. You're going to go with the highest one. You may have a bunch that are low risk, and you may be doing one that changes conditions on a reportable complaint, right? So, and it's a custom system, so that puts you in that high level of 5. Risk is a really important, often overlooked part of the change control process. Not only determining what the risk is, but how you're going to control that risk. And we'll show you that in an example on the form later on.
Definitely. And, you know, we usually talk about risk to the system, you know, the impact assessment to other systems. And I think that's what this form will address as well.
Okay. So this is a real basic change control form here, guys. Change number, what is changing, assessing your risk, describing your risk and mitigation. And I worked with teams that I expect the technical people who are actually making the change to tell me how they're going to control the risk. And this is it's a challenge for your technical people. Until they do it a few times, they're really not sure what you're looking for. But what I expect to see when somebody does a change control, they know the technology they're changing, the code that they're touching. What are the downstream impacts? Tell me what could go wrong. How are you going to change? How are you going to mitigate? How are you going to prevent that from happening? This is so crucial to change control, because if you don't understand your change and you don't understand what can go wrong, then you're not in a state of control. So I do expect my technical people, when they're filling out a change control, to tell me what can go wrong, how am I going to prevent it? Then you're going to do your impact assessment. This is basically what requirements are impacted. Then you do your functional risk assessment again. This could be new requirements, it could be changes to requirements, but just like on the initial implementation, what's potential to impact patient safety, product quality? What's the complexity of that requirement? That gives you a test assurance rating. Think of this as like a mini val plan, right? You're creating a mini val plan within a change control. So how am I going to test it? I'm going to do a screen print. I'm going to execute a test case. You're mapping what's changing to how it's going to be tested. The next step down there is conditional approval. And I use conditional approval on 2 conditions. One, and these are real world, right? One, I know I can't get all my documents approved all the time before I go to production. Frankly, sometimes I don't want to. I know I'm probably going to have updates, and I want to get it approved before I close the change. So that's a deliverable condition. The other one is production verification. This is not the same as emergency change control. Production verification could be, I have to change some data in production. Maybe I have to go in the back end. I can't test it in QA. So I've got a little bit of additional risk there, and I'm acknowledging it up front, and I'm saying, I've got a conditional approval because I've got production impact without QA. And then I'm just routing it for approval. This can be attached to your electronic change request. If you're on a paper-based system, you just route it manually. Maybe you use DocuSign. But these are the basic elements of a change control. What's changing? What's impacted? How am I testing? Questions on this?
Yeah, that's one thing that jumped in mind is, so, you know, the conditional ones that doesn't require pre-approval, that's more like an emergency change, right?
No, it's not the same as an emergency. So okay. What I mean by production verification is, let's say you got a change control where you have to fix data on the back end. So you actually have to go into that production database. Yeah. You can't simulate that in QA, right? You can't verify that it works in QA. So you've got a little bit of additional risk because you can't test it out first. So you're just acknowledging that. And the other one is that I'm not going to have all my deliverables done. Maybe my risk assessment is impacted, my traceability matrix, and they're going to be draft when I go into production. They're going to be final draft. I don't expect them to change, but I don't have time to get them approved. So it's a little different than an emergency change, and be very sensitive to emergency change controls. Emergency change controls will always get asked for. So to me, and this is my definition, an emergency change control is not because it's the end of the year and somebody has it on their PMO. An emergency change control is it is off hours and production is about to stop or has stopped because of it.
Agreed. Yeah, that was where I was kind of going with that, is how, your recommendation is to control that, because I mean basically, any of the 7 in my group would get a call anytime that emergency happens. So we could do a verbal approval, but it still has to be passed by somebody in quality, somehow. To proceed, and it's really just determination is this really emergency, or is this a check mark on somebody's, end of year, get it done.
Exactly. Somebody dragged their heels and they have a commitment, and now it's hot.
Right, and then you go back and then you fill out the paperwork the next morning. You have 24 hours, literally, not 24 business hours, but you have 24 hours to document it down.
And I'm going to bounce this to Tina, because I know she has sat in audits where they specifically just asked for emergency change controls.
Yeah, they have. And, and my pushback is, there's 2 definitions. You have urgent, which we need it urgently, but that does not necessarily mean it's emergency. And I've also seen some metrics where they would pull it, and I've had to defend some questions where it's like, hey, I've looked at your change controls and 20% of them are emergency.
Which is bad.
That's way too high.
Really bad.
Really bad.
Or you have a bad system in place.
Or you have a really bad system in place. So then it just leads to more discussion. And I do look at our chain metrics, and system by system and overall. And I would start to react if I see anything above like a 2 or 3% in the population for emergency changes. So, I acknowledge there's a human factor, but urgent changes are not emergency changes.
It is usually a human factor. They got used to it, and it's much easier. And I do recall, actually, in Belgium, there was a 483 on the LIMS systems, because 80% of their changes were all done in production, directly in production. Again, and it really all depends on how flexible, the quality organization, how conservative, how liberal they are. It's really important to pick that fine line. Yeah.
Right.
And think about it. If you were auditing a company and you saw that, you would say, you're not in a state of control, or this system is not in a state of control.
Exactly.
Right. And the other thing where you've got the change implementation risk assessment, where I've seen you also have to take into consideration the system level risk, because, risk has multiple views. So sometimes they'll elevate that risk because it's a business risk. Well, that means it's urgent, but it may not necessarily be a high risk change. So I've had some situations where it's a medium risk system, but then they have a change control that says it's high risk. So how is that possible? So, also take that into consideration, or your change process. If the risk of a change has a different lens than your system risk, then your procedure needs to clearly delineate what the definition of that risk is.
Great point.
I'm not sure. Did we answer that question from Richard? Richard, did we answer that for you? I'm seeing a couple of other questions.
Yeah, this will be available for download. Khaled, I think all we need to do is email it to Connects, and they'll upload it to this particular topic.
Yeah, we can actually upload it to, It will be right there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any more question on this specific slide here? The next one, you guys have seen it.
Khaled, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to cover Richard's question, because it had to do with the previous slide, where he asks, can you discuss why a system with none for impact would still have GXP deliverables and not just be out of scope for CSA?
Sure. Because you can have a GXP system and a requirement within that system that has no impact to patient safety and product quality, right? Still is a GXP system, still needs to be validated, but that particular requirement doesn't impact patient safety or product quality. I'm trying to think of a good example for you. Maybe it's something like the ability to
A clinical
add.
trial management system? Clinical trial management system, CTMS?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Or
use
I
it to manage investigator sites, but it doesn't really impact patient safety or product quality.
Right. I have another example. We have a service management system on the medical device side where we manage services, and there's a module in there where we have, where we charge back to the customers. It's a finance module.
Yep.
So in that case, it's absolutely dealing with accounting and finance. However, it's all part of one system.
There's Arena, the document management system has a function in it that when you approve it, allows you to add a comment that's not part of the record, but then goes to all the other approvers. So that has no patient or product impact, right? But if that was changing, I'd still need to assess it as none.
What about indirect product? Like there's direct and indirect. So you make a change here, and downstream it could have a impact, on something within the product.
Yeah, and that's what we're asking you to think about. That's what we're asking you to think about. So first of all, direct, indirect, I like to define it by the system of record. Is it the system of record, and then determine if it's direct? If it's not the system of record, is it a system that's feeding that information into the system of record, or is it consuming that information? So it's indirect. But you're 100% right. You consider the downstream quality checks that are in place. And when you get into that direct impact, so you want to think about things that are automated processes, automated decisions, no intervention from a human or any other system. That's when you really start talking about that direct impact.
Right, but it still could be an indirect system, like you take a look at at a production line, right? So you have just like the bioreactor, right? So there's a direct impact there, but you got some of the offline testing that could have a direct impact, but but the system that's actually doing the testing does not have a direct impact, but upstream or downstream it can. If it's not producing the right results and that type of thing, then and yet you're still basing decisions off of that, whether it's automated or not.
And that gets into the whole data integrity piece, right? I'd still say
yes.
I'd still say you have indirect there until that data is consumed, until a decision's made by it. So you in your example, you've got lab analysis, lab results that are feeding some type of manufacturing system to determine acceptability, right? It may be indirect in that lab system. Downstream, it becomes direct as it potentially impacts product. So if I'm changing the lab system, I'll assess it as indirect, but I want to make sure I've accounted for that scenario.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions, comments? I know we reached the top of the hour. Please feel free to email or even any additional questions, or you'd like to know some more about CSA or any other topic, we'll be more than happy to help. Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys, have a great afternoon.
Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.